It's too late, Bruce. This was God's will. Here's your look at the McFarlane toys. This is DC Multiverse. Batman, The Curse of the White Knight, Azrael. War veteran, Knight of the Order of St. Dumas, and now the Joker's key recruit in the crusade against Batman, Azrael is the Dark Knight's most powerful new threat, and one living link to the devastating secret about Wayne family's legacy in Gotham City. Azrael is the last figure of this recent wave of DC Multiverse figures, but don't interpret that actually as this figure is the least interesting. It just usually is the case if there's a Batman in the wave, I'll usually look at him first. Joker, if he's part of the lineup, more 9 times out of 10, look at Joker, the next figure. It so happens that means poor Azrael sort of stood at the end of the line, but don't interpret that again as this figure being the least interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff going on for him, a lot more colors as well than the other 2 figures possessed. Needless to say, though, before we get a closer look at the details, the thing we always continue to do on this channel without fail is to first figure out how tall the figure actually stands. Now, there is technically 2 schools to look at this. You can either go right to the very top of his hooded head, or you could go to the tops of his cape, the little strappings of cape. I'm probably going to take it to his head. I mean, technically, yes, I probably could have gone a little bit higher than that, but I just think for the figure itself, his cape represents an accessory, essentially, something that's going to be attached to the back of the figure. So really, if you want to look for how tall the figure is, I'm going to be more inclined to probably go to the top of his head instead. If you feel that that's not the case, that's entirely your prerogative. But according to the tape measure, though, Azrael to here, and not here, stands here, 7.2 inches in height. And that in centimeters makes the figure 18.3, so almost 18.5 centimeters tall. Let's do some fun size comparisons. Now, I normally would have just brought in Batman, or I would have normally just brought in Joker, because those obviously were the other 2 figures from this wave. But making a promise that I would tell myself earlier into these reviews that I would go and find the Hellback, I definitely did want to bring him in so you guys can see the comparison with some of the larger figures that we've gotten from DC Multiverse. Based on what we're seeing, of course, moving forward, we're of course going to be getting the DC Metals Batman, and we're going to be getting some much bigger figures than probably even both of these figures together. But I thought for the time being, let's do some comparisons between the Hellbat Batman, because I don't feel like I give him nearly enough love. That's a pretty cool looking figure, but you can see how much bigger he is than Azrael. Azrael's still a big figure, but I think Hellbat so far is the biggest that we've gotten from the waves thus far. And yeah, of course, then we can also bring in Batman, which we've already had a look at. We can also bring in Joker, that we've also already had a look at. A stellar lineup. Centric, of course, around the idea of the Batman White Knight, or in the case of Azrael, the Curse of the White Knight. But you can see that these characters do stack up rather nicely. Still loving the design of that Batman. He might be my favorite figure, one of my favorite figures that McFarlane has released so far of the DC Multiverse line. Although Azrael is no slouch, neither is the Joker. Checking out the figure's accessories, first we'll of course have a look at the trading card, which unfortunately is bent. I got one little bent corner. I don't know what happened. I was taking it out just as careful as I take out all the other cards, but I've got this big crease just on the corner. That kind of makes me sad. I like the artwork on the front here. No, by the way, you can't get Azrael to hold the sword with both hands. I've tried. Doesn't seem to be the case. But nice, decent looking artwork done on the front. I'll have to put that and include that with the rest of the trading cards I've been collecting all this time. Right on the back, though, you have the sources Batman Curse of the White Knight. There we go, number 1. Comics 2019. Real name is Jean-Paul Valley, who also, of course, donned the cape and cowl during the Nightfall run and Night Quest line. And, of course, his height, in this case, is 6'4", and his weight is 250 pounds. He's a big boy. And then there's a bit of a read-up of which I did say at the beginning of this review as well. So again, you got yourself some trading cards. We can add that to both the Joker and Batman that we've gotten, and we've got ourselves, I would consider already 3 cards to be considered a collection. You might consider your collection to be a little bit larger with more cards, but like I said, we got some nice decent cards in the mix of that. Other accessories do come included with the figure. He, of course, gets his circular display stand. Nothing different about that. In fact, this is the one that we just had a look at with Joker. I don't know why I got particles or something all over it, but there is the two figures stands. As you can see, they're identical to one another. Mirror copies to one another, short of maybe this one having some additional fingerprints. Periodically, you might just want to take a cloth and wipe these down. Being that they're matte black, for some reason, they show fingerprints like nobody's business. Nobody's business? That's what it looks like on the back, by the way. Again, nothing different between the two. So let's talk about stuff that is different about Azrael, and that happens to be his one and only accessory. He comes with his sword, and more specifically, he comes with a flaming sword, or flaming sword. The sword does have, as you can see, it's been completely engulfed by flames. I thought for 1 second that this flame was removable, and sure enough, yes you can. You can detach it altogether if you would just like to prefer to have the sword without flames. Sans the flames. A nice touch by the way that they've done that. Just enough of a groove that you can then slide the sword inside. And it sort of catches, these are the things that are holding it together. This piece right here, this, and this. And like I said, it holds it well in place. I personally would like the idea of just displaying the figure with the flames, but the option is certainly there. You can slide that out, and like I said, you can put that back in. It's a nice detailed sword, all things considered. I mean, without the bells and the whistles of the flames, which I have to admit the flames do sell the sword well, I mean, even in the actual hilt, you can see there's a nice gold done there with an inverted, there it is right there, a certain individual hanging from the cross, certainly there in the middle of the handle there. Nice, decent looking sword, all things considered. Now, normally, I would have located some place on the back where the sword would be housed. Having it engulfed in flames probably would cause a little bit more of a havoc when it came to his costume. But in this case, there is no other place. There's nothing on the side, there's nothing on the back of the torso where you can actually house the sword. So he either holds it, or the other option is he doesn't hold it. Wow, that's a pretty simple option. Having a look at the figure itself, it's traditional Azrael, that is certainly the case. While the costume has changed, a lot of the elements still remain the same. Things like his coloring, for example. I know the colorings have changed on the costume a little bit, but generally when I think Azrael, I usually think red. Of course, hood-wearing vigilante, who of course would have donned the costume when the broken Bruce Wayne had to retire the mantle of the Bat. This was the guy that picked it up. To lesser successes, I would feel. A little bit more excess, more than success. One other thing that's noted for Azrael is the little straps of cape. Similar also, when I see this, to Mr. Sinister. I know it's two different comic properties, but of course, this reminds me very much like Mr. Sinister. It's smart the way that they've done this also as well. Like, this is just draping rubber plastic, as you can see. But they've made the top parts, the parts that stick out from the shoulders, more of a rigid plastic. There's little to no give to these. And it is enough and strong enough that suspends and holds the rest of the straps. Really smart the way that they've done that. A nice detailing also done. I mean, not only are they practical, they serve a purpose, but they're also nicely detailed here as well. You've got these almost feather-like details on both sides, all done in gold. There is a lot of gold actually going on this particular figure. Gold, of course, shoulders on both sides of varying sizes. Of course, he's got the much larger shoulder pad on one side, a slightly smaller, more basic one on the other. I want to really talk about his head for a second. Now, the head is covered over by a shroud of his hood here. The head does itself actually have posability to it. You could technically move it by itself, but the way that they've sculpted it, you still have full posability in the head. And it's really interesting that they've made enough of the base here, there's enough of an open socket inside that you can actually hide a bit of the hood inside there. They've allotted for that much clearance. It's really interesting the way they've done the posability on this guy. We'll talk more about that in a second. The hood is really a nice touch, as well as the face that they've sculpted inside. Nice panel lining represented around the eyes to really make those white eyes pop and stand out. He has actually several different colors of red. This lighter raspberry red, we're just probably going to use some food for comparisons. A nice, almost raspberry red, more on the pinkish side, And then he's got this darker ketchup or lime or a wine-colored red there on the tops of his shoulders. And then he even has like a darker area around his tunic, where as you can see, it's been added some additional black, just brushed over top of it, just to kind of give it a little bit more depth so that you can see a lot of the details. Speaking of the details, like look at the gold additional accents that have been added here on the front as well as the bottom of this additional strap of fabric that drapes down from his shoulders. Equally to that, you can see he's got the cross with the chain that goes around his belt with some additional details done to these pockets, all representing, as you can see, the cross. He does have a strap, which is a continuation, of course, from his belt, the way he's tied it off, but he does also have on the side a holstered knife. No, you cannot remove it actually from the sheath. This is all one sculpted piece. But as you can see, there's some additional crosses added there as well. Then, of course, as you continue on down from the legs, you have that continuation of that raspberry red. I know looking at the figure, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, he comes across very stocky. I mean, I know we did the comparisons before with the sizing on these figures, so for example, we'll bring in Batman yet again. I mean, proportionately, he has the same body proportions as Batman does. I think it might just be the fact that his calves are so broad that makes him look very stocky and almost out of proportions, when I know that's not necessarily the case. His arms do seem also like they drape too far down, but if you consider it, his knees are quite low down. I think maybe what's throwing me off is that his torso seems right, but then his lower legs, I don't know if his thighs need to be a little bit longer, or they maybe need to be a little bit more shorter, so that his hands should probably be lining up to around here. They almost come across like they're maybe too short in length. And they're very broad arms, let me tell you as well. He unfortunately does sacrifice a little bit of posability. He only has a single hinge in the elbow, which we'll talk about also in a second. But he does, like, visually, for me at least, come across a little on the short, stocky side, which I guess is really the point of the character anyways. There's the back of what the figure looks like. Again, you've got this exquisite looking gold on the shoulders. Love the detailing that they've done to that, as well as the gauntlet that he has not only on this arm, but also on this arm as well, where you can see the little rivet points there on his armor. Nice, nice touches. As we get down to his feet, again, like his legs, there's, again, just something off for me from this point on. I don't know if, again, it's just the length of the thigh, but his feet, like his calves literally just go straight into his foot. He doesn't have any area where it tapers down and tapers off to a smaller ankle. It's just broad, broad, broad. He literally has tree trunks for legs, which maybe, again, the character of Azrael should be a big, broad, bulky character, but it certainly does come across that way in the figure here. He has similar boots to what you would expect to find with, say, the likes of like Robin Hood, for example, little tufts, little flaps that drop down at the tops of the boots. The coloring on the boots are more that dark cranberry color that we were looking at before. Not quite the same color as this, but it's very, very similar. I think probably why this comes across slightly darker is because they've added that darker brushing of black paint. For the figure's articulation, now we can go and talk about the head again. I really like what they've done here. You don't want to bring, obviously, the head too far up, because you'll see sort of the way that the neck curves its way inward. But certainly by giving them as much the socket as they did for this particular figure, it really does mean that when you move the figure's head sculpt down, he doesn't stop, for example, when he hits that point where you can't move the head any further down. Like, I really like the way, I don't know why I love that so much, that you can actually tuck the head in, including as well the more softer rubber that they used for the hood. Really nice touch by doing that. But still, you can rotate the head all the way around. I don't know why you would want to, but you can do that. And there's technically head articulation on the inside of this as well. I don't really know why you would need to move the head independently from the rest of the hood, but you could technically pull that off if you wanted to. Now let's talk the arms. The arms hinge outward, and like with that we've looked at from McFarlane Toys, he has the additional socketed joint that's on the inside here. You don't see too much the appearance, and actually it's slightly darker as well, so it blends nicely into the rest of his torso, but that does allow for just a little bit of clearance outward. No, you can't actually have him holding the sword in both hands. The hands just can't simply get them to bend. I guess if you had the sword like this and you ran it straight through, but as you can see, the arms don't quite they don't quite seem to clear. Like if I took the sword right now and fed this through, like so, just feed it in between the fingers like so, and just sort of navigate it through. It doesn't seem like it quite clears the connecting of the two arms together. As you can see, it's awfully tight quarters. And if you get it together, you're only barely touching the other end of the hilt. So unfortunately, he only really holds it with one hand. Just slither that out for a second. He does have upper torso ball joints, as you can see, very hidden nicely because it overlaps the fabric, just the way that his costume is designed. He has a good ball joint happening there. He does have a secondary ball joint at the base of the torso, right there, where it sits inside the waist area. There are areas, yes, that as you are shifting it, you'll see there's a bit of a gap that forms, but not nearly enough, and certainly from the angle that you're probably going to be looking at the figure, you're probably going to notice anyways. As for the legs split out. Full splits on Azrael, and you can move those legs forward, you can move those legs back. He has a swivel essentially where it just attaches to the ball joint. There's the ball joint on the inside there. So basically what it is there's a hinge joint that allows the leg to split out. Does that make sense? And then there's a secondary peg that connects right there. You just can't see it unless you had X-ray vision. But it would be like right there. That's basically the joint that allows that leg to rotate. That's the same with all the DC Multiverse figures. Then he does have a double hinge on the knee. And then when we get down to his very stocky feet, again, they're just a continuation of his calf. They move up and down. You can rotate his feet all the way around. And he does also have toe articulation with an ankle pivot as well. There's not really too much I would change to this particular figure. Maybe initially, when I did get this guy out of the packaging, I did think that he was awfully stocky. And I guess in some ways that hasn't changed. My opinion still is that I feel like his lower half is like he's very broad. Like there's not much definition from the thigh to the calf, and then from the calf to the foot. It's basically all just one straight bulky shape. But again, that's the size and design of the character. He's a big bulky character after all. And they just simply translated that to figure form. And overall, I'm really liking the design here of Azrael. Even though this figure of Azrael is based on the comic pages of Curse of the White Knight, still though, when I see this design of costume, and thank goodness it hasn't changed much over the years, too much at least, or I hear the name uttered Azrael, immediately I think to the days of collecting the Nightfall run, where of course Azrael for a short period of time donned the cape and the cowl of the Cape Crusader, while Bruce Wayne was healing up after being broken by Bane. That forever for me will be the moment when I think of Azrael. And of course I know he's made many appearances since that point, and his costume has changed, but not changed too much. For Curse of the White Knight, it went back to basics, kind of giving us more the trademark design of Azrael's costume, a little bit more souped up, yes, but still the elements are there. And as it translates to a figure, I really think that McFarlane Toys did a bang-up job on this release. I sort of, in a way, feel bad that I left Azrael for the end, because there's a lot of talking points on this particular figure. Does he look a little on the stocky side? Yes, he does. I feel like his lower half, just below the waist, something's off on his legs. Maybe it's just the fact that there's no real definition from the thickness of his thighs down to the thickness of his ankles. It's sort of all that same thickness that sort of causes the figure to look a bit stocky and bulky from the waist down. Other than that, though, I really like the color scheme that they went with. Several different shades of red, all working together quite nicely, and he does come included with a flaming sword. A nice touch also is to the added bonus of being able to remove the flames. I don't know why you would want to not display him with the flaming sword, but to each his own. If you prefer your sword to be without the flames, sans the flames, you can easily remove that as well. Overall, really a neat looking figure, and until the days that perhaps he decides to go back to the Nightfall run, which is probably slim to none, let's face facts, this is probably going to be one of the nicest Azraels that I have in my collection. What do you guys think down below of the new Batman Curse of the White Knight Azrael from the new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse line? I know many of you guys have already picked up this figure if you're located in the States. Here in Canada, they're slowly starting to trickle through. It seems maybe a couple of week difference between the time that the United States gets these figures and the time that Canada gets these figures. I've got these pre-ordered over on EB Games. So as quickly as a phone call away, as soon as they say we've got the new lineup of figures coming in, usually they'll specify that it's the DC Multiverse, I'm on my way right away over to EB Games to pick these ones up. I just picked these up actually a couple of days ago, and we're having a look at these right now. But let me know down below what you guys think of the Azrael and what your favorite figure was of the sort of White Knight trilogy of figures that we've looked at over the last couple of reviews. Let me know down below in the comment section which one is your favorite. If you're also new to the channel and you're liking the content that you're seeing, and let's just say, even though you're liking the content, you haven't yet had the chance to hit that subscribe button. Don't postpone till tomorrow what you can accomplish today. Hit that subscribe button down below, move on over to the bell notification and make sure you turn that on, and make sure you're staying tuned to this channel as Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you'll be finding new videos popping up. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.